Sure. Hello! Welcome to another exciting edition of Move Mondays. Before we get started, I'd like to give kind of our regular disclaimers. Mainnet is coming in Q3. We can't talk about any partnerships that aren't published, and we can't talk about when token, but Mainnet is coming Q3. We are looking for, we are hiring across a wide variety of positions, aptoslabs.com/careers. If you know anyone in engineering, business development, or any of the other fantastic career opportunities here with Aptos Labs, aptoslabs.com/careers. Please send yourself, your friends, your grandmother, send them all that way. Now, I do want to talk a little bit about launching ID2. That happened this past week. That's exciting. Registration opened up. I know that some people have been having some trouble completing KYC. We made some changes last night that should make that process for those who reached the end of the KYC process successfully, but who didn't see a green check mark. So for those, please try again one last time. For those who are having problems with having their documents read or understood, please open a support ticket in Discord so that we can try to help you out. Otherwise, we have over 5,500 people who have successfully been able to complete KYC as well as notice. Super exciting. Huge shout out to Daniel for the node checker. Which has really ensured and helped ensure that nodes are set up correctly. Because we've seen a lot of errors related to using the incorrect, following non-official guides, basically. May have worked for IT1, but are not the same for IT2. Yeah, so we have 5,500 strong, good nodes, which is a fantastic turnout. And we have a few more days to go. And there are more and more nodes joining every minute. Another exciting news, we are launching the forum tomorrow. Yay! So this is something that a bunch of us have been working on for some time. The forum, we've been looking in Discord, and there are a lot of, especially in the dev channel, around standards for key rotation or for wallet or discussions around implementing sort of randomness or any of these kind of things. And it makes my heart full to see that we actually have a thriving community now, which is absolutely amazing to see, and that there are a lot of people, honestly, that know Move already much exactly what I hope to see, and it's fantastic. But the downside of all this happening in Discord is that you have discussion 1, discussion 2, discussion 3, and it's very hard to follow. So the forum, it's launching tomorrow. You'll be able to have discussions on there. You'll be able to submit suggestions in general. So we have a suggestions channel in Discord, but it's very hard to follow. And so you'll be able to submit suggestions, be able to upvote suggestions, and that'll send a really good signal to us about kind of what we should prioritize on our roadmap with feedback from the community. Additionally, similarly, we mentioned 1 or 2 weeks ago about vote for additional participants in IT2, and I want to make sure that we do recognize those people who are contributing. So we've been working on a list of people who've been contributing. Your IT2 node registration successfully and completed KYC. When you log into the forum, you'll see that you're able to post in the ID2 Profiles channel. This is a great place to talk about why you're running a node, who you are, and it allows other people from our community to come and vote for you. And so we'll be pulling from that list as well to help reward some of the community members that, community recognizing community participation, I think is a great way to go. Additionally, coming a little further out is projects. We want to highlight, a lot of projects that are building in our ecosystem and allow projects to communicate with their users and submit grants. Before that, we are going to have a project section on the forum as well. So you can go there and talk about what you're working on, really allow people to see who's building an Aptos, because that's one of the questions that we see very frequently in Discord is who's building? And the best way to answer that is to show them exactly who it is.
Yeah, so we also want to talk briefly about the fun, or maybe not so much fun, people of experiencing with our process. And we just want to let you know that we're listening, and we want to kind of walk you the mentality and the thought behind actually building node health checker and some of the goals for Aptos. As intentionally a layer one for everyone, I don't say that glibly. Now, in certain aspects, one thing that we quickly noticed to get the primary concern out of the way is when we set up the latency checker on the node health checker, we had a, dare I say, naive assumption that this would map directly to ping type of latency. However, as we spent some time kind of debugging over the weekend, we recognized that this was inherently bringing in many rounds of ping style, because we have the TCP session establishment as well as HTTP session establishment. And so folks that were getting roughly 500 to 600 millisecond latencies were baffled. We were kind of baffled as well. We're like, well, if your ping latency is 250, well, then your node health checker latency should also be 250. So we figured out why that wasn't the case. Big props to Daniel, who's also on the call for figuring this out. And so we're going to be moving that number up to 1 second on the node health checker, which should roughly map to an equivalent of a 500-ish or so millisecond ping time. So that should be enabling people across the world that are provision environments to contribute to the network, which is the goal of building this out. Now, one of the other things to just contemplate, and one of the reasons why we did build out the node, was because in order to actually build a layer one that can properly support everybody and the throughput and the latencies kind of in previous communications, you can't have people running the Raspberry via pigeon carrier contributing to the network. That will introduce excessive delays, slowdowns in throughput. There's just no way to really provide the scalability in a critical section of the network. And what we also noticed in AIT1 was we had people that did set up nodes that were able to register. They were actually able to get connected and somehow partially participate, but their latency was either excessively high, their throughput was low, or their machine wasn't able to keep up with the rest of the network. And so rather than able to effectively contribute the consensus process of the validator network, they were just kind of dangling on the side, and it wasn't a good experience for them, and it wasn't a good experience for the network. We weren't actually able to use that to improve what we'd imagine we'd see come mainnet. And so, but what we did recognize is that there was something that we could tactically do in two folds. One, from the core tech stack of the validator network, we now have a properly implemented reputation system for monitoring the validators that propose and the validators that vote. And we take that into consideration on the rewards that they're going to get in ensuing rounds, as well as rewards for the staking rewards, just to be clear there. And then also their likelihood to be able to be proposers in the future. So effectively, we're leveraging that for reputation. Therefore, the blockchain should effectively drive the blockchain to provide higher throughputs and lower latency because we're emphasizing these aspects. Now, in order to actually we want to make sure that the node health checker existed, ensure that nodes that hit pretty low-endish but still meaningful metrics were able to get into the AIT. Now, just to be clear, we set numbers of roughly, well, now 1 second, which is effectively a 500 millisecond latency. That's still pretty high if you think about world latencies, where you can see roughly somewhere between 250 to 300 millisecond latencies for extreme distances on the Earth. And so we're still opening up the door to be welcoming to the broader community, but we do imagine that as mainnet comes, we're going to see that latency shrink down. And in terms of actual TPS, we're expecting that we're going to see thousands and thousands of TPS come mainnet in a decentralized distributed system. So by setting a 500 TPS, again, that's a very modest requirement. And so just to be clear, these are the goals for AIT2. Once we start approaching AIT3 and we get some of the data from AIT, we're going to actually increase the requirements so that you have to bring in even more meaningful machines that can handle higher TPS, as well as supporting even more aggressive latency goals. Now, we'll work with you folks to make sure that we're taking in the right numbers, coming up with arbitrary numbers that don't necessarily equate. But hopefully that gives some context on some of these goals here, because the reality is, even if you did have enough capital to become a staker or validator on mainnet, if your latency or your throughput doesn't map to the rest of the system, it simply won't be able to be an effectively participating validator. The rest of it will move much faster. And so I will pause there, and I think we are now ready to move on to Mana.
Yeah, we have a fantastic presentation from Mana. We do have a question about the latency. I don't know if you want to answer it. What is the... there may have been a little bit of dropout via Discord.
So in the validators, for registration process, we have ensured that validators must be roughly a 500 millisecond ping latency, or what equates to a 1 second according to the node health checker. And so the goal here is, this is just simply how quickly messages around in consensus. And so nodes that exceed this substantially will inevitably time out in actual consensus rounds in the real validator network. And therefore, we are setting an appropriately high bar to make sure that people effectively participate in our validator network. So I think that should cover that, so we can move to Mana. We will have a Q&A section after the presentation where we'll be happy to go into greater detail. We just wanted to kind of get that out of the way, because I know a lot of you have been rightfully frustrated by our arbitrary low setting, and we wanted to let you know we heard you, we recognize that, we spent the time to understand it, and hopefully this does allow people that do have appropriately configured machines and environments to participate in the IT too. So thank you so much for calling that out, and we were a little myopic in that.
Fantastic. And now we have the presentation from Anna.
Hey guys, it's Mana here. So we recently added this transaction simulation feature into the latest DevNet release. You can find the interface here in the SDK in the latest version 1.2.0 already. Here is called simulate transaction. I'm just giving you guys here a short demo of what it actually looks like once this feature is integrated into a wallet. So for example, here we have a Hippo DEX, and I have like 10 USDT here sitting in my wallet and a little bit of Aptos test coin to pay for gas. So let's say I want to swap this USDT to Bitcoin. I'm going to use all of it. So when I click on this swap button, my wallet is going to ask me for confirmation. And here it's already displaying the result that it has gotten back from the simulation pipeline. And it says, this transaction is going to cost me 0.000421 Aptos coin. It's also going to cost me 10 USDT. And in return, I'm getting back about this much BTC. So it's 100246. Let's see if the number is exact. Yeah, exactly 100246. So basically, this simulation feature, once used by a wallet, can help the user estimate the amount that it's going to cost, and also help the user figure out whether this is a spam website, whether this is a spam transaction or not, by showing how, previewing how this transaction is going to affect the user's wallet balance. All right, that's it.
Fantastic. Thank you, Mana and Hippo, for a really neat get built on Aptos.
So can we actually bring Mana to the floor? Maybe?
We can.
We're gonna try it in Discord again.
Invited to speak. If Mana is here.
Mana is here, yes. I saw him there earlier.
I mean, I invited.
Oh, I see.
So he.
Yeah, okay. Well, if there are any questions...
He wants me to call him Mana. Let's see how well this works.
Are you just gonna put it next to the microphone?
Yeah, actually, I don't know how. Sure, can you comment?
Technical difficulties.
Fantastic. What do we do? Well, Mana connects.
It should be very fast.
Huh?
Hey, Mana.
Wait till that. I'll take care of it. Hey, Mana, how you doing?
Is the speaker on?
Oh.
Speaker mode.
Hold on. There we go. Now we usually good. Can you speak?
Yep.
Awesome. So we just wanted to welcome you. Wanted to kind of go through a couple questions. Let you share, the motivation. So you built this simulation framework out. You got this pretty cool wallet here. I'm just kind of curious, what inspired you?
Mana? Is it muted?
The setup is totally messed up.
I think there's still some network issues despite all our best efforts. They really.
I can hear you guys.
Oh, I asked you a question, Mana. Could you tell us a little bit of framework?
Yeah, sure. So basically, we have experience previously on other chains where we can submit transaction and get a simulation result back to see, let's say, how this transaction is going to cost me, how much gas is going to cost me, how much I'm paying, let's say USDC, BTC I'm paying for this transaction, and how much I'm getting back. And I think that's a very, very useful feature for wallets to have. So it's essential for users to understand that how much gas they're paying for this transaction. And another useful reason is that there are some scam sites out there that are basically just trying to drain all of the coin from the user's wallet, and with something like this transaction simulation, which can preview how users' wallet balance is going to change, users are going to be able to straight away spot that kind of scam activity.
Cool. Yeah, I think that's going to be fantastic. I'm really for those that are not allow listed or no. The other thing I'm kind of curious for is, now that we've got this new API, do you have any?
Yeah. So actually, the first version of it didn't quite go well with the code review because it had some security issues. So the first version basically was implemented by sending a signed transaction to a full node. And the malicious full node would have the ability to that signed transaction directly to the chain, even though its purpose is for simulation. So a little bit of work had to be done to get around that problem, and basically the current implementation is such that we're submitting a transaction request with the signature removed.
Yeah.
So that way, the simulation full nodes, even though they have the transaction request, they wouldn't be able to send it and execute it.
Right. Yeah, that was awesome. So one final question for how do I can and you found a great opportunity and a great way to. Could you walk us through what you found was the hardest, what was the easiest part, and where should people be looking for?
Yeah, sure. I think the easiest part of Aptos is how readable the code base is for someone like me as an engineer, compared to, let's say, some of the other code bases for the other chains. What I find in Aptos is that so far the code is really well organized. It's like really easy to just dig into things and figure out how things work. And sometimes, occasionally, if you need, take things apart and make changes that you need. I feel it's a crime to not dig into the Aptos core repo and the move language repo to experiment and create new features that you like.
Dude, you gotta stop your making.
Are you guys able to hear me?
Yeah, I was teasing. I said you're.
Oh dear. Oh, right.
Anyway, continue on. Apologies. So, just the last question then. How do you imagine?
Connection is unstable.
Okay. Well, let's just there. Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, so if you could just where do you think other folks should look?
I think right now we are just starting to build out an entire ecosystem around the chain. So one area that's particularly lacking is probably standards for wallet interoperability. I think right now almost all of the wallets that I've seen that have been published are conflicting with each other. So I think the wallet makers probably have something to work out there, so some sort of standard to agree on. So another interesting thing that we're missing right now is probably a community token list, which is pretty standard elsewhere. So basically, all the wallets, all the DEXs, they need to recognize a particular set of coins, of tokens, so they can just pull the metadata from that token list. I've heard that there are some groups that are preparing this kind of list, but I guess that's where it's the easiest to contribute right now.
Cool. Well, I just want to say thank you so much, Mana, for this very late night for you. I think it's and contributing to better for everyone. Wish you a great rest of your evening.
Yeah, thank you. It's a pleasure.
Take care. All right. So shall we thank you again? Feel free to...
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you again. Yeah, I really appreciate the calling it a crime not to dig. I wish it was. Q&A. As always, you can ask questions in our Discord related specifically Move or developer. We answer questions. We are a chain, though I can't say that, but specifics around tokenomics, around listing, that's in the future. For now, I can say related to that. So one of the questions is, what is the community voting phase? I think that was covered. There'll be a community and vote for specific validators. We are launching that tomorrow to kind of help walk you all through that process. The official response to the latency was David gave. The TLDR is the TPS / latency, the latency check from the node check to account for roughly round trip, which should align with those who saw a difference between our node check latency and ping. This should help account for those. We are, as always, and global decentralization. So this will help, I think, a lot of you who've encountered this issue be able to, in South Africa and wherever else, we are layer one for everyone.
To add on that, I think that that's definitely not true. Any two validator 500 milliseconds of latency. So what we're wanting to try to guarantee is any validator latency is under the baselines we set up. So we wanted to make, no matter which region you're, no matter like what kinds of like environment you're running, bars and standard. Yeah.
Fantastic. Global distribution. It's happening. What's next on the roadmap? AAT3. Then.
So if you saw, we are actually going through, we just wrapped up some of our initial roadmap path to mainnet. I think we'll probably need another couple weeks just to nail down on specifics, and then we'll return back to the community sometime shortly after what that path looks like. We still are on track to fruition with you folks.
Let's see. One question is, can I run on Ubuntu 20? Yes, you absolutely can. Although finagling to get the right version, but you absolutely can.
Is that 22 or 20?
20 has no issue. I think 22 OpenSSL. OpenSSL.
Why can't people pass KYC? But when visiting Aptos, know that you please try again. We fixed that. If you are unable to, please submit the Discord support. What is Move? Move is a language. It's for the blockchain, and it was made Meta. The idea is that Solidity and a lot of other languages allow a wide variety that people can make. Whereas with Move, the idea was to become resource-oriented, specifically around allowing for the compiler to catch way early, way in advance, way before. There's also a formal language, kind of neat, which makes it really kind of the first formally verified distributed language for blockchains. You can learn more on Aptos. There are a lot of guides, getting started.
So there's a question on Now, if you look in the actual move, the several fantastic did actually make it so they move source code and compile it down native EVM and deploy. The other one that we've also spent a little bit of time at least is whether or not EVM could theoretically on top of Aptos in parallel to move. And our initial investigations suggest, and we might even be able to use the with EVM, which would allow us to do a major parallelization using EVM. Of course, that's not on our roadmap for main research exploration.
But if someone out there wants to try, we
And I think that kind of moves into the next question. How is Aptos Move different? And so if you have had a chance to go through the Move guides, the Move books that are the origination of Move and really centered. And so a lot of the historical operations and notions of, as well as an account model, still exist within inside of Aptos. Aptos of the origination of Move that provides such as tables, we've got strings, we've got some other types of data structures that are built. We've also have resource accounts. And so all of these are things that uniquely make Aptos a more for permissionless blockchains. Sweeg's model is that of objects. It's a bit more, it's actually wildly different. And outside of data structure, there may be limited between the two, just because the notion of the way resources in Aptos, whereas the notion of resources doesn't exist in Sweeg Move as far as I'm aware. Which leads into the next question. Do we have any questions from the audience? I'd rather do live questions if you have any.
I don't see any.
Cool. So just interrupt me or I will continue going down this list. Somebody asked, what is, and so just this past, we actually spent some time to make it more accessible and understandable, more useful. And so in the next DevNet release, we have this new resource account that actually walks you developers step by step through the process of using. Now, that didn't answer your question at all. Instead, I just kind of told you it would be easier. So what does it actually do? So in an environment where everything is account centric, that implies that the notion of an autonomous entity is ambiguous or unclear. And so an autonomous entity might be a DAO, it might be a liquidity pool, it might be some smart contract that just executes based upon events from the blockchain, users interacting with it. In Move, we have a limitation due to the notion of Move2 requiring a signer. And similarly, we also have an issue where you can't necessarily publish to a blockchain, publish to Aptos or Move without having a external accounts represented with on-chain accounts. And so the goal of this resource account is to enable users to at least have the ability to use Move2 with an autonomous account without having to do some sort of janky business. And janky business is things that are either impossible or constrain accounts to actually requiring direct user interaction. And so that solves the problem of Move2. And then we created this new module called Resource Accounts to allow for users to actually seamlessly publish their module and then transition owner over to this autonomous account. And as I kind of alluded to, these are going to be really important for things like DAOs, shared ownership models, shared account models, especially if you look at some of our token standards. Rather than trying to shove in a complex royalty process directly into the token standard, we simply allow the royalties to be delegated to a single account, and in that account you effectively deploy your module and your resources that define how a royalty should be shared for the token. And these are all the different things that we can imagine might be useful for using resource accounts. I'll pause. Any questions? Cool. So there's also another question about the 4 movabilities. I would strongly recommend, if you have a chance, to kind of jump into either our tutorial online, which is Max says on aptos.move. I think it's under the move itself and then Aptos move.
Aptos.dev.
Aptos.dev. But just to kind of quickly go over those, we have, by default, those structures themselves have no attributes, which means that effectively only the module itself can create it. They're uncopyable, and when they are not droppable, and that means they have to be deconstructed. So that brings in the most important, the first one, which is the drop attribute, allows the struct to just disappear at the end of calling without having explicitly been deconstructed. This can be really interesting if you want to have resource conservation to make sure that a struct didn't just, or value or currency or something just doesn't disappear from the network. The next one is copy, and copy literally means I can make a copy of the struct even if I'm not the module in which this copy function is happening. You then have store. Store, it pairs up with key, so let's talk about key first. Key means that I can actually install that as a resource into my account, so that means we're going to actually put this into global storage as a top level element. And then the store allows a struct to be stored with inside of a resource. And so a great example of that is table. A table may be a resource or directly inside of a resource, and then elements with inside the table must all be storable so that they can be stored for persistent usage afterwards. Okay. So
Still good.
continuing along. How to make modules upgradable. There's a fantastic conversation I was having with Magnus this morning, and effectively there's a couple of things that are precluding us from actually getting there, and there's also an endeavor internally just to make sure that we land down on the right upgradability model. Now, the reason why we disable upgrades in the first place is because we have this really cool block STM, and we also have parallelism, and what we found out was that module upgrades, if done in a certain way, would actually not be reflective in storage changes, and therefore they were effectively blocking progress from downstream nodes from being able to compute the history of the blockchain, and they get stuck in their state synchronization process. I think we can try to dig out the historical issue. We probably should have an issue that we can share on GitHub just so folks can follow along. We need to resolve that, so that's a P0 on our roadmap before mainnet. Now the other aspect that's also an important P0 is really nailing down how to represent upgradability. And so upgrades have a lot of different contexts. You can imagine an upgrade that is there for bug fixes or for minor features. You maintain the same ABI, you maintain the same data structures, but there's just kind of some cleanups inside that code base, and you want to do a redeploy. Then you also have upgrades where you might want to be changing the entirety of everything of your contract, but you might want to make sure the data is migratable from version 1 to version 2. In the first case, we need to at least be able to do some amounts of checks to make sure that that's the case. And even after you've done those type of checks, you want to make it clear to the blockchain that you're actually upgrading from a given version to a new version. And so in the current context of Move that we have today, we don't really have the notion of versioning. You only have the notion of a single module and a single entity for that. You just have that module name. So we have to introduce this ability to have a tuple there where you have module name and version. And along with all the checks to see that the version is actually compatible with the previous version. The second thing is when we actually think about major upgradability, we have to make sure that developers can specify which contract they want to integrate with. We at this time have not landed on if we will provide any sort of seamless way to go from one version to the next, especially since that could involve breaking API interfaces, but we do at least need to give users the ability to specify which version which major version of a module that they would like to call. I think I covered that one in some depth. Let's see if there's anything else in here. Any questions from the floor?
Let's see, we said move language channel and dev discussion channel, correct?
We might also check wallet dev.
Yeah, I haven't, yeah. There's nothing yet, but I am going through the submissions.
Okay, so then I'll continue on. So we'll continue to evaluate the number of validators that we can have in testnet over time. The biggest goal that we have is to make sure that we're actually able to get meaningful outcomes that help inform the evolution of our software. And so theoretically, we could probably go in and have 1,000 validators on today's network without, with it still functioning to some extent. However, that wouldn't necessarily help us really evaluate the cornerstone of the code that we're trying to learn about so we can actually make it ready for mainnet. And that's the biggest constraint on why we've set what might appear to be somewhat of an arbitrary low number of validators.
There's a question in the stream. It says like, is the private keys, identities, and everything generated in AIT1 valid for AIT2? Well, technically, the key values and everything's still valid. You can reuse the same account address and key numbers. However, the format of the file, like each of the fields' name is a little bit different. We made it more explicit this time, and the fields of private key will stay private to avoid people making the same mistakes from AIT1 that lots of people submitted their private keys for the application. So yeah, if you wanted to reuse the same value, just make sure you update the file, the field's name so that the tooling can recognize the new format of the file, but feel free to reuse the same value. The easier way is just use our new tooling, new version, and generate the new pairs. That will make your life much easier, but if you wanted to reuse the same value, that's totally fine too.
Cool. All right, I think we went through all the questions that I had in the question bag. Do you want to talk a little bit about the wallet process that we're going through in the standardization effort?
Yeah, and going from some of what Mana said earlier, we're going to take maybe a more active role at Aptos Labs of trying to define some of these standards, such as API for wallets, as well as errors, and then even going into some of the stuff that Magnum 6 talked about, or key rotation and key recovery in general. And so we have a wallet we're working with, but also all the community. I'll try to post a lot of this in the wallet dev channel and to get feedback from the rest of the wallet builders in the community.
Fantastic. Also, forum. A great place to discuss these things.
Always be selling.
Always be selling. And that's coming tomorrow. Fantastic. There are no other questions that I see in Twitch or in Discord. We can pick random questions from some of those that were submitted.
Feel free to raise your hand on Discord or just type in your questions in the Twitch live stream. So if you have any questions about AIT2 or any of the questions we talked about today, so yeah.
The question is, how long do we need to run the node for IT2? Please do not turn it off. We will very likely test your node more than once throughout the week just to confirm things, especially as we make changes to the node health checker. And if you get selected on the 11th, then you'll know how to convert your node into one that's part of our actual ID2 validator set. Otherwise, at that point, you can turn off your validator. See.
There was a question about the requirements for full nodes for Incentivized Testnet. Do you want to take that, Sherry?
Sure. Full nodes are optional for registering AIT2, but we do highly recommend people to run full node, since like a full node would be a way for people who don't run a validator node to be able to talk to the chain. So we would encourage people to set up the full nodes and use the same hardware and the requirements we put for the validator nodes. But it's not a hard requirement if you absolutely don't want to run it for registering AIT2. Yeah. Hopefully, in the future, we'll come up with better economists and incentives for people to run a full node so that it doesn't have to be a highly recommended and it can be something people actually really wanted to do. But yeah, if you are not chosen to be a validator node at the registration of AIT2, running a full node is also a way for yourselves to keep monitoring what's happening on the chains and have a way to communicating to the chain. And if you wanted to developing applications or work on your experiment or learn more, running a full node is also a great way to gain a lot of the knowledge and access to the chain. Especially as a node operator, running a full node will help you get understanding of like what it requires to run a node and potentially help you like also set up all the infrastructure that needed to run a validator node if eventually you become eligible or selected to run a validator node. So yeah, it is highly recommended.
Fantastic. Let's see. How to increase your chances of getting into the testnet? Contributing to our community and to increase your chances of passing the actual validation, making sure that you're running on your node with sufficient bandwidth, and meeting our minimum criteria for what a validator requires for CPU and RAM. Other than that, we'll see.
I do want to emphasize that the goal for AIT acceptance is not intended to be gameable. So even though we are going to do for a community forum voting, that is not intended to be a place for bots and spam for people to go in and sybil their way into AIT. We will be doing analysis on all voting, and if we recognize completely random individuals with no experience at all in the Aptos community are being selected, we will call those out as not likely really contributing, and that will not get you a seat into AIT2. This is really intended to identify those people that our data analytics frameworks didn't recognize, but still did actually contribute. And so we are trying to find those needles in the haystacks and not just to, have self-identified needles, so to say.
For sure. We have spent a lot of time doing analytics for IT1, little for IT2 to help prevent bots. I wish we didn't have to, but we've gotten very good at it. So
Max might be leaving us to go join one of these organizations in the near future.
Yeah, I've been doing a lot of analytics and data science work. So yeah, we will find you. Please don't. Please don't. it's always a growth time. But if you are actively contributing to the community, we do want to make sure that you get rewarded.
Yeah. This is all about making sure that we really are as inclusive and inclusive as possible and recognize those real contributors. So we're really excited to bring this to you folks because I think this will really bring a lot more enthusiasm and a lot more people to the top in terms of like being able to recognize and to continue to contribute in that space. Because going back to AIT1, one thing that I really loved is going into that chat group where there was a lot of really positive energy and people really working effectively to make each other succeed. We do recognize that there were some people that didn't exist, and we do want to make sure that we have even more activity in AIT2 chat group. And that's not just because we're doubling the number of validators, but also because we bring in folks that are looking to actually make Aptos even better.
Fantastic. Yeah, why only allow 100 validators initially? Why not more? I think that was...
So we're doing 200, but again, that goes back to the limitations that we're trying to seek to really evaluate the software that we're developing. As I said, we could probably go up to 1,000 or more validators with inside of the existing software, except the challenge would be we wouldn't be learning things that actually help us make a more stable, more secure, more performant mainnet.
Cool. Yeah. These are still all the questions.
Cool. Well, we've got 6 minutes left, so we're going to give you all back 6 minutes and wish you a fantastic rest of your day. Thank you so much for coming, listening to us. And again, thank you, Mana, for sharing your amazing work. And we look forward to future contributions, both from Mana and Hippo, as well as from everybody else out there.
Cool. Bye, everybody. Have a great week.
Thank you.